Welcome to the Hamumu Halloween Home Horror Hoedown, the podcast where we watch scary movies so you don't have to.
From award-winning to completely unknown, we take them all way too seriously.
I'm your host, Mike Hummel.
And I'm your host, Solange Hummel.
Now, warning, we use a ghoulish number of spoilers, so watch the movies first.
Second warning, we don't know anything about anything, so don't take us seriously as we take these movies seriously.
All of these movies nowadays being since 2012, I guess,
Okay.
start with a dramatic death, sort of unrelated to the main story.
Yeah. I mean, this one was very related. They're always related.
But yeah.
Yeah, it was a very dramatic prologue to this one.
They're just like, they always start up, let's see somebody die, get their face thrown in a fire, or jump out of a building, or whatever it takes.
Whatever it takes. And The Woman in Black from 2012 started with 3 little girls having a tea party and then jumping simultaneously out of 3 windows.
3 very adjacent windows, yes.
Yes. The attic windows.
Yeah.
It was convenient, for some definitions of convenient, that there were 3 windows for those 3 girls. It would have been more problematic for the woman in black to convince them to perhaps throw themselves out of a single window one at a time.
Yeah. Well, they could all, grab onto each other and woo. I don't know.
It was convenient for her that there was a window for each girl.
Yeah, that helped.
Yeah.
That's probably why she picked them.
Yeah, and throughout the whole movie, we have these images of children being possessed by the woman in black, telling them to do something terrible to themselves.
Yeah, that's kind of her gig. She
is a vengeful ghost.
Yeah. So her deal, her being Jeanette, the woman in black.
Oh, I didn't even realize she had a name.
Yes, she's the sister of Alice Drablow.
Right.
Alice took her son away and declared her incompetent and was like, I'm going to raise your son.
Yes.
And then didn't watch that son well enough and he drowned in the marsh.
I don't even know that it was a watching well enough situation. They were driving home because they lived on an island in the middle of water.
Yeah.
The tide comes in and it's an island. I mean, an island is always in the middle of water, I suppose.
That is the definition.
The tide comes in and the house is on this little island, and then the tide goes out, and then there's a perfect road between the island and the mainland, which somehow is nicely paved and drivable in between each high tide, which doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, it's weird.
But so they were driving home and the tide was coming in, and they got caught in the marsh, and Alice saved herself, but didn't save the boy. The boy drowned in the marsh.
I feel like I wasn't paying enough attention. I understand now why they pulled him up in a car.
Yes, it was like a horse-covered wagon.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so then the woman in black was angry that...
She did not like that.
No, she's like, you took my son away from me, first of all, and then you let him die, and now I'm going to kill all of the children in this village.
Yes, but first, she killed herself, which made her into the ghost that could then kill all the kids in the village. Mm-hmm.
And we're finding all of this out because Harry Potter is a lawyer and has been sent...
That's one way to describe it.
No, Daniel Radcliffe is the main character. The story revolves around him as a young lawyer being sent off to deal with the estate of this Alice Drablow after she has died. And it reminded me a little bit of The Wicker Man.
Yeah.
In that there was somebody from, the big city being sent to this little community and being received in really unpleasant, awkward ways that you don't know why everyone is so unhappy to see you.
Yeah. Everyone in this village was really clear that this was a bad house and you don't go there.
Right. Because they all knew that anytime someone sees the woman in black, she kills one of their children.
That's
like, they
not
knew
great.
this.
I feel like they should have been more convincing.
Right? But did they say this to him? Were they like, look, man, our kids will die if you go to this house?
It's kind of a big deal.
They didn't, no, we don't like talk about what the stakes truly are. Instead, we just give him lots of like weird looks and, hide behind the curtains anytime he walks past your window and tell him, oh no, we don't have that room that you booked. I guess you have to stay in the attic, which by the way, has 3 conveniently placed windows.
Yes, it does.
So I cannot blame him for not getting the point of what was happening. And so he goes and he tries to do his job because he's been threatened by his boss back in London, like, get this right or else. Mm-hmm. And he has to take care of his young son.
He has a young son. Uh-oh.
Uh-oh.
That seems problematic.
But before it becomes problematic for his young son, first he gets several of the community children murdered.
Yes, so many. I mean, it's not really his fault because nobody told him this is the thing.
But he's out there in that house, like he is just seeing the woman all over the place, right? Mm-hmm. Every time he sees her, somebody dies.
That was a complaint I had with this movie, was there were just too many scenes where somebody, generally Harry Potter, would see a ghosty person in the distance or in another room or whatever and go, oh, what's that? And go looking for them. And it was just so much of going looking for them and not finding anything and then seeing them somewhere else and going looking there.
He clearly was a character, like his character was not someone who was superstitious or believed in ghosts. Like it was clear because he at no point did he think that there was a ghost. Even when he was seeing the ghost, he was just like, someone must be here.
Yeah.
And given how they've been, treating him in the village, it's not shocking that he'd be like, one of the village men is here trying to mess with me.
Yeah.
The whole movie had a very like Charles Dickens feel to it.
Yes, this is a period piece. All kind of, the guy he made friends with is the only guy in town with a car.
Yes. But even beyond that, like it just had kind of the whole like everything was dark and dingy, like the whole like industrial era dingy.
Yeah. And
everyone was sad and like it just the whole thing was so melancholy all along. And
yeah, well, it's a town full of people whose children keep getting killed.
That's true. But like everywhere, the whole movie, I was just like, really? No one in this universe has like something yellow?
That is a fun bit at the beginning of the movie. Arthur's son draws him a picture and he's like, this is me and that's you and that's mommy. Mommy's an angel up in the clouds. And
don't forget the nanny.
Oh, and
because
the nanny.
The nanny's the person who takes care of him now.
Yeah, the nanny's like the most important person in his life. Arthur's face is a frowny face. He's this little stick man with a frowny face. He's like, why
do I look so sad?
Why do I look so sad? The kid's like, that's just how your face looks.
Out of the mouths of babes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he went away for the weekend to go do this job, and the nanny and his son, Joseph, were going to come up and meet him on Friday, because where else would you want to spend the weekend than some incredibly dreary town full of people who are mourning the death of their children?
Yeah. In the swamp.
Although, to be fair, he didn't know that when he invited his son up. It was also a very gothic story. Like, it had all the hallmarks of Gothic. It had that dreary style. It had the big...
straight up haunted house.
Haunted mansion. It had the, sad family backstory multiple times over.
Yeah.
Everyone had a sad family backstory. Ones. It had, crows and spiders and graveyards and all that stuff.
Oh, my.
Had the wet footprints walking across a room.
Yeah. Thunder and lightning and rainstorms.
Absolutely. Which made me realize, how when we play movie bingo and every time I put a thunderstorm on there?
Yeah.
I think it's because I just spent a lot of time reading and watching gothic horror when I was a kid. Like, I read all the, spooky industrial era ghost stories.
That's back when there was thunder and lightning.
I guess. They also had a ton of music boxes and various other toys that made music.
This kid, the kid who originally belonged to Jeanette and was stolen, had only wind-up toys for toys, and he literally owned them all. He owned all the wind-up toys.
Which made me wonder, is that like would that have been like a wealth and status kind of thing? Like,
seems like it.
Like, these are elaborate toys that had to be handmade, to be able to do all of these things. And so clearly they were expensive, and he had a bunch of them. Mm-hmm. Look how well I can provide for this child I stole from my sister.
Yeah, but on the flip side, they're not fun. Because, the first time you turn it on, that's pretty cool. You get to see what it does. But then that's what it does. You don't really get to play with it. You just turn it on and let it run its thing.
It was a simpler time.
I would have rather had a bouncy ball.
Yeah. I mean, a stick.
A stick, a bouncy ball, some chalk.
Yeah.
All the best toys. A hoop, obviously a hoop and a stick.
Obviously. I mean, I feel like this child probably felt the same way.
Yeah.
I don't think those toys were purchased for the child. I think they were purchased along with the child.
It sounds like you're on Jeanette's side.
I kind of am. Like, her sister was a beanbag. Like, you don't get to steal other people's kids. That's not acceptable behavior. And then to just abandon them as your wagon is sinking into the mud, and you're just like, guess I'll have to steal another kid.
Yeah, which actually is what Jeanette was doing, because we discover that all the kids she's murdering, they're like stuck around as ghosts in this house. Mm-hmm. So she's collecting the kids.
Mm-hmm. But I liked the gothic horror aspect of it. I think it was done well, and it definitely had an atmosphere to it.
Hey, Soli.
Hey, Mikey.
Let me tell you something. This movie is based on a book called The Woman in Black, which I don't know when it's from. I think it's an older book. And there's also an earlier 1989 BBC television movie of the same book. So exciting stories to be shown. And then they made the sequel to this, and I think somebody was going to remake this. I mean, it's a story that people are into. Quick research indicates the book is from 1983, so not that old.
Written by Susan Hill of Scarborough, North Yorkshire.
Of course. This is all very British.
Yes. Yeah, it definitely, it is in fitting with a lot of those other stories, like...
The Haunting of Susan Hill House.
That's funny that you said that.
The House on Haunted Susan Hill.
Yes, those, or I was also thinking of We Have Always Lived in the Castle. Definitely, there's a vibe there.
Yeah, they're out on the moors, it's foggy, horses scream in the night. It's something they do. They, break their ankles on something and go, and everybody's so upset.
Yeah.
And then there's some guy going, yar, yar, and the horse is like, wee. That might be a goat.
That did sound like a goat. I also wanted to say, when I was trying to think of those names of those titles, I was going to say What We Do in the Shadows, which is also kind of gothic, but comedic gothic?
Yeah.
Anyway, Arthur Kipp, should he have stopped at some point?
Well, he was hired to go get the documents from this house, not just get them. I guess he was supposed to leave them there and just look at them while they're there to support or relate to this woman's will. And the first thing I saw him look at was like a birthday card. And I was realizing very quickly that he took the brief of looking at documents way too far.
Oh, yeah.
He drug out everything from this house.
He was crawling under beds and stuff.
Yeah, and he was like, let's see what the 7th grade yearbook looked like. He's just... Yes, he should have stopped because he didn't need to look at all these things.
So I think that any other lawyer who they had sent would have received the documents from the lawyer that was there in town, who was like, showed up and was like, here's a manila envelope full of everything you need.
Yep.
Just go home now.
That's what they told him.
And they probably would have been like, well, that was easy. Boss doesn't know I'm coming back till Friday. Maybe I'll go take a little vacation time. Like,
but
I don't know.
Not in this town.
No, not in this town. But Arthur Kipp had it fully impressed upon him that if he messed this job up in any way, he was kaput at work.
And then he was really attached to the whole idea that they were coming out on Friday.
Yeah.
And so he really wanted to be there till Friday.
Yeah. I also feel like there might have been some point with like lights coming and going and doors opening and closing and people knocking but not existing, like all kinds of things were going on where I'm like, there might have been a point somewhere where he's like, you know what, I'm not sure about this.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll only do this in the day. Why was he working all night long?
That was because it was about the haunting. Like, he was gonna look around and see if he saw her again or something like that. Like, he wanted to stay there and have his chance, and maybe get it all done because everybody was pushing him so much to get out of there.
Yeah, that could be.
I don't know.
That could be. Although they also were like, okay, we're dropping you off at the house and we're going to go back to town and the tide is going to come in and you're going to be trapped here until the tide goes out again.
Yeah.
And so that was an interesting little like tool to use in terms of like isolating him.
Yeah. But
still having people for him to interact with when needed. Like when the story needed, not when he needed.
Yeah. I think that was a cool idea for, trapping the person, and, the traditional, you have to stay here all night to get your money from the will or whatever. Right. But this makes a lot more sense. It's just, it only is usable half the day. Although I feel like they didn't really exploit it very much. It seemed like he would just have a little event or two happen and then it'd be like, oh, well, now it's time, I'm getting picked up. And
yeah,
I don't know. He didn't feel very trapped.
I mean, to me, he felt trapped, but it didn't feel like it mattered at all.
Yeah.
Like,
maybe that's it.
I don't know. Yeah. Because it didn't feel like he cared that much. Like, he didn't seem to want to be getting off the island.
No.
As much as he was like, this is weird, I'm a little spooked. He wasn't trying to leave and not being able to. He was just...
Yeah, that could have been...
being there.
Kind of interesting. So, on the train down to this city, town, village, pub? No.
Crossroads.
Pub with other buildings.
On the shore.
On the way down to this little town, he meets a guy on the train. It's a rich guy named Mr. Daly who befriends him and is like, hey, come over for dinner. And he also is doing a bad job of being like, don't go to that house. He kind of supports him going to the house. His wife, though, has some problems.
Yeah, my note was, Mrs. Elizabeth Daly is not well.
No, she's not, and I guess she's not mentally well. And she needed to take her medicine at one point.
Well, yes, her medicine, which I was like, that makes sense. She seems like someone who should probably be taking some medicine.
Yeah.
And then they chloroformed her. And I was like, that's an interesting...
That is a rock-solid medicine
choice
for mental issues.
Yeah, I think she was mostly, broken after her son was one of the victims of the Woman in Black.
Indeed.
And she was, determined that it was sort of like she was insisting that he wasn't actually dead, but she knew he was dead. So instead she was putting all of her, maternal everything into these two pugs. Yeah. Or whatever kind of dog they were.
Dumb little dogs.
The twins.
Yeah.
It was an odd situation there.
And she had this psychic connection to her son, or maybe to Jeanette, I don't know, where she was getting messages from the beyond that she would scratch into things with a knife. They weren't very helpful, but... She
even said at one point she was saying the things that her son was trying to say from beyond the grave, where she's coming, so she took us, whatever.
I feel like that's a gothic element to just randomly throw a psychic in there.
Yes. And especially one who everyone thinks is mentally incompetent.
And they have to chloroform.
and one who gets chloroformed. Yeah, so Arthur was a little surprised, though, to find that the twins who were going to be dining with them in high chairs with full-on outfits, like little matching sailor outfits.
Yeah, you gotta have
bibs,
sailor outfits.
And eating off of like golden spoons being hand-fed by Mrs. Daly were 2 dogs.
Yeah.
They were not the only dogs in the movie, though, because we also have Spider.
Belong to the same family.
Spider didn't get to eat at the table, though.
No, not at all.
I wonder how Spider feels about that.
It was real sad. But then Mr. Daly lets Arthur doesn't even let him, forces him to borrow Spider for the night. And it's just weird. Like the idea of being like, here's my dog, have my dog for the night. I kept thinking about like, when's the dog going to get fed? And does he know how to take him for a walk? And
I kept thinking that's not how dogs work.
Yeah, he was like following him around.
You can't just be like, here, have my dog, and the dog's just like, oh, I'm loyal to this person for the next 12 hours. Cool, gotcha.
Yeah,
no,
that's weird.
That dog would be like, no, thank you.
Otherwise, burglars would like hold you hostage and be like, declare me his owner for the next 12 hours. Maybe they wouldn't.
I don't know. It was weird. And then he's got this dog, but he's still wandering all around the house completely alone. The dog's not anywhere near him. I'm like, why? I was really worried that something terrible was going to happen to Spider.
I know. I figured that would happen, and it didn't, so that's good.
Yeah. Spider was pretty much the only thing that something horrible didn't happen to.
Pretty much. In fact, one of the horrible things that happened is Arthur and Mr. Daly were working to unearth the body of Jeanette's son, the original son that was at issue.
From the swamp.
Yeah, he was in the swamp in like black goo, because that's what swamps are made of. Which
was marked with a giant cross that somehow didn't sink into the swamp.
No, they put it in. It's got like a buoy underneath it. But Arthur goes in and dives under and is like, tying a rope to this car so that they can pull it out. And I caught an IMDb goof all by myself without knowing it was a goof, and then looked it up and saw that it was a goof.
Oh my gosh, what was it?
It wasn't that exciting. He had his face completely covered with mud from being completely buried in mud, except there was a clean spot all around his mouth. And I was like, oh, he totally had like a scuba thing in or whatever. Yep, I caught it.
Yep. I am really glad I'm not Daniel Radcliffe, and I am really glad I did not have to act that scene where he was under mud.
Yeah, that's gross.
Like swimming in mud, which again, how did the cross stay at the top if it was so liquid and sinkable that sink intoable that he could basically swim in it?
Well, that was right. That was like the edge. There was like a straight drop off right there what the cross was in.
Perhaps.
He was in it like a grave.
Perhaps. So he did find the wagon, which still had the boy's body in it, which I'm kind of on Jeanette's side because she's mad that like one of the things she's angry about is that they didn't even like bury him properly. They just left him in the mud. Daniel Radcliffe was like, I can feel it under my toes. It was less than 6 feet under.
Yeah.
And they were just like, well, nah.
And they knew where it was because they put the big old cross.
Exactly. And they're just like, I know there's a child down there, but whatever.
Come on, guys.
If we pull him up, we're just going to have to put him back in the ground somewhere else.
Right. That's the big problem with living in a swamp.
Yeah. It was justifiable anger on Jeanette's part, if you ask me. So anyway, he finds him, reunites him with his mother, and thinks, all is well. I have solved this ghost mystery. This is clearly what the ghost wanted.
Yeah.
All done.
He was absolutely sure he had this all figured out without the traditional, trip to the library and books on ancient wisdom or anything.
He didn't need any of that.
He just figured it all out and did it. And so that was that. And that's how the movie ended.
He also realized that the way he needed to draw her to the nursery where he had laid out her child's body was to activate all of the wind-up toys at once.
Wind-up toys, which were legitimate antiques and not, in fact, made for the movie.
They looked like legitimate antiques, which was kind of funny because I'm like, I don't think they would look like they were hundreds of years old while this movie was happening.
But everything in that house looked all dead and worn out.
Yeah. All those wind-up toys definitely reminded me of the monkey with the symbols in the Stephen King story, The Monkey.
Sure.
Where, like, every time the symbols clashed together, like, someone died or something, right? Like,
yeah, I
bad
think
things
so.
happened. So, because I have read that story, all, like, industrial era wind-up toys give me the creeps.
Yeah, I mean,
because I'm pretty sure they're possessed or cursed in some way.
They're definitely creepy.
Yeah.
Speaking of creepy, we get into a key discussion point for today.
Okay.
This movie was selected for us. By the way, I've already reviewed The Woman in Black 2 many years ago. I didn't bother looking up what I gave it or anything, but whatever. But this one was selected for us by a TikTok video on this guy polled 500 people on what their scariest movie is. And this was in the top 10 scariest movies for these people. Solely. Mm-hmm. Was this a top 10 scariest movie?
No.
I
mean, top 10. I don't know. No. But here's the thing. Gothic horror to me is not top 10 horror.
Yeah.
Like, I don't find it. It's creepy. It's got the energy, right? Like you're immersed in like, ooh.
Yeah, because everything's so depressing.
Right. And everything, like you never know when there's going to be a spider somewhere or whatever, right? So it's creepy, but it's not scary the way like so many other movies that we've seen have been scary. Like when I think of top 10 scary movies, I'm thinking of Train to Busan. I'm thinking of Eyes of Your Mother. I'm thinking of Goodnight Mommy. Mm-hmm. I'm thinking of Under the Shadow. Yeah, like it has to be way more upsetting and like, I don't know. The backstory to this was not unusual or scary enough for me.
Yeah. When I think about scary, I think more visceral, like, it doesn't really matter what it's about or anything, just the moment to moment. Like jump scares, yes, but also, a really creepy hallway that we're slowly moving down, like just things that feel scary, that hit those emotions. And for me, I think Gothic horror has great potential in that regard. You've got this very creepy old house in all of them, and you're in there and it's dark and, things
I would
come out of the walls.
I would even say that there were some shots where it was like you're looking down a long candle-lit hallway and like you can't see things well. And yeah, the potential is there, but I don't know. I think for me, it's that, this dead lady is mad because her child was killed, and so she's seeking revenge on all the children in the village. Like, that's such an old story. And it's not to say it wasn't done well here. It's just not, it's too predictable to be scary.
Well, see, like, I would say that to me that doesn't matter, because it doesn't matter if the outcome of the story is predictable or whatever, because it's that moment to moment feeling that I'm concerned with, as in terms of whether it's scary or not.
So did this have that for you or no?
No, because at one point the woman in black zoomed across the room on a camera dolly. And that was weird.
That pulled you out of the story a little?
Kinda, yeah.
So, okay, I listed some of the ones that immediately came to mind. And I want to say, like, if I went through and actually knew what all the movies were, I might pick different ones as the most scary ones. But those are the ones that come to my mind as being like, they stuck around in my head because they were scary in some way. What would you say?
Well, the number one that always comes to my mind is, you know what, I was going to be like, this probably wouldn't get me anymore. But I remember rewatching it decades after and finding it still scary. The Blair Witch Project. Blair Witch Project
was definitely terrifying the first time I saw it.
Yeah, that's scary stuff.
There was something about the whole handheld found footage, someone panting in fear in your ear constantly for 2 hours. That was definitely spooky.
Yeah, that was, that was my number one definitely at the time. Like, I remember I remember being in the theater, and every time Day would come in the movie, I would be like, okay, we're good now. I hope another night doesn't come.
I remember also, I saw it in the theater, and I remember sitting on the edge of my, like, literally, I caught myself at one point. I was like, this is what they mean. I'm literally sitting on the edge of my seat.
Yep, that's how it works. Yeah, I don't know what other ones I would shoot for. Yeah, otherwise I feel like it's kind of movies that nobody's heard of, like that aren't even necessarily great movies, and probably are mostly found footage, really. Like just, spooky stuff in a house. Like Paranormal Activity is kind of scary because things jump out at you.
Well, it's like you said, the visceral nature of it. Like those are movies that tap into your internal, like the way your body tells you you are scared.
Yeah.
Either you're breathing fast, or you're like holding your breath, or like there's so many things that our bodies do when we're afraid. And if a movie can get that sympathetic response happening, like definitely. Or like Paranormal Activity ones, I think it's because you spend so much time watching the corners because you're like, something is going to happen, and your body is like, okay, clearly we're in danger because you're very attentive to all the details. Like,
I think
they
so.
trigger these responses in us.
Yeah. So maybe not top 10 scariest for us.
No, I don't think so. But I also think, like, we've moved past this kind of scary. Just, I think culturally, like, these are not the things that are scary anymore.
Well, no, for us. I know we've got people who listen to our podcast who are like, oh, I can't watch Teletubbies. They're too scary.
Oh, that was a call out. Oh, my gosh.
Oh, that's like my dad with ketchup. My dad's afraid of ketchup.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think a lot of the people who listen to this podcast are probably like, oh my gosh, everything is, all of these movies are scary. But I think in terms of people who, watch horror now, gothic horror is not the horror that's like scary. It's you watch it for other reasons. Because, I don't know, this is probably me just projecting, but
sounds like it.
These are not the things that scare me. So clearly they're not the things that scare anyone.
Duh. Yeah.
Ratings. As we said, this was not the scariest movie. I do feel like it was done well in terms of the atmosphere and all of that. Like, it evoked what it was trying to evoke. I just don't find those things as scary as other people, perhaps. But one thing we haven't mentioned yet, and the thing that for me kind of elevates this movie, like, I'm pretty sure the ending, the last like 5 minutes of this movie, will cause me to add on a full point in my rating. Because it was the piece where I was like, that is not what I expected.
It's not what you expect.
Because everything else, I'm like, yep. This is all exactly what you would think if someone told you that they had written a gothic horror story, about blah, blah, blah. But the fact, and here are major spoilers, if you intend to watch this movie, you should watch this movie before you listen to me talk about the end. But the fact that I expected that kid to die.
Yeah.
Like,
lots of kids died in this
movie.
Right?
Like, it was coming. Like, and when she was all, never forgive, I'm like, oh, dude, you're little, like, we're going to reunite you with your son and you're all going to go on your merry little way. That plan didn't work, my friend, and now your son is in grave danger.
Yeah.
I knew that part. So I went on this emotional roller coaster. I was like, oh, this is so sad because I know someone else is still going to die. Like, there's this whole ending, like the son and the nanny show up and, oh, everybody's feeling better. And like you can feel all the stress is off, except it's not because I know this kid is going to die. And then the kid, is being lured in front of the train by the woman in black, and I'm like, yep, here it comes. And then Harry Potter is gonna save him, and I'm like, holy roller coaster, like, I was sure he was gonna die, and now, like, everything is fine, and then nope, they're both dead.
But also, you left out another hump in the roller coaster, which is that they're both dead, but they're meeting up with the kid's mom, his Harry Potter's wife, and
it
like
turns
moving
out
on into
everyone's
heaven.
okay with it.
And so they're like, yay,
Yeah.
this all went well.
Like, it went from sad ending, kid's gonna die, to happy ending, kid's not gonna die, to sad ending, kid and dad both died, to happy ending, yeah, they died, but it's okay because this is better.
Heaven.
I don't know. Like, yeah, it was quite the roller coaster in like the last 4 minutes of the movie. And I enjoyed that. And so I think that took it and turned it from a movie where I was like, yeah, okay. I don't have a lot of complaints about it, but I'm also not in love with this movie, to, okay, I don't have a lot of complaints about it. I'm not super in love with it, but you gotta watch it because the ending is right there.
Yeah.
I don't know. So anyway, I am going to give this movie 4 sips of lye out of 5.
Ooh.
And it really is because of the ending. Without that ending, any other way that it had ended, it probably would have been a 3.
Huh. That is quite
Maybe
a
a 3 and a
strong
half.
point.
But I'm giving it a 4 because I really did appreciate the ending. The only thing that would have made it better for me is that we didn't see the like schmaltzy, like, oh, they're reunited with the mother and everything is okay, don't be sad bit at the end. I wanted it to end with like the nanny looking down onto the train tracks and seeing the splattered bodies.
Wow.
Okay, maybe not quite that graphic,
Wow.
but like I wanted it to be very clear that like we're thinking that, you know, the dad's there holding his son up against the thing and he's like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I survived that. And I was thinking, I cannot believe you survived that. Like, that train must have been so close to you. Well, yeah, it was on top of him.
It was very close.
So, like, just a little bit of, like, proof that just even the nanny's face looking down into the thing and screaming because she's not relieved, I would have been like, oh. That would have been the perfect ending for me.
Yeah. Well, I want to tell you that they added the happy ending with test audiences, and it did not have this happy ending to begin with.
Test audiences ruin everything.
I mean, regular people are dumb, so yeah.
So anyway, I would give it 4 out of 5. I think it's a good watch.
All right. It's funny. I'm not going to dive into my issues again, but I do want to point out that this is another movie, just like The Beach House, that ends with someone getting smacked by a vehicle out of the blue. Although less out of the blue because we know it's coming and he's like trying to save his kid. See, it's much better. Stakes, drama.
Yes.
But
Buses only work in certain instances.
But, you know, in that movie, it was like she made all this effort to try to save herself and then just splat and it's over. And like, why did I watch that? And here it feels very different. He makes an effort to stop the ghost and he thinks he succeeded and everything's kind of cool. And then, you know, we see that he hasn't, and it all works out. And like, there's something to it. And I don't even know how to describe what that is that's different about that, but it's so much better, so much more integrated. I don't know if I liked the ending, but I didn't dislike it. It was interesting and, you know, creative and worth seeing. So I appreciated it. But overall, we haven't seen this kind of gothic ghost story in such a long time, and it's just fun. I like to get that, you know, this is where ghosts belong back in the 1800s. That's when we had the most ghosts and the best ghosts.
Yeah.
Today's ghosts are just, they don't know what they're doing. So I like those 1800s ghosts.
These new young whippersnapper ghosts, they need to get off our lawn.
Gen Z ghosts
Get out
is
of our
the problem.
attic.
Absolutely. The greatest ghost generation. So for me, it's all not bad, but it didn't blow my mind. It wasn't this great thing, but it was overall just a, you know, good feeling, just straightforward little story to enjoy. So I would give it 3.5 sips of lye out of 5. So I recommend it. It's not my favorite, but it's good. It's not in my top 10, I would say.
That's fair.
So that's all we have to say today.
So maybe next week we'll come back with a top 10 movie, or more likely not.
More likely a bottom 10 movie. We seem to find a lot of those, more than 10.
Those are fun too.
They are really fun. See you then.
Bye. ¿Por qué no comemos en la playa?